William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I welcome you to another Two Hats special of community events. Let's look in and see what's really happening.
And good afternoon and welcome to Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Lerone Landis. The late Patti Fink is being the late Patti Fink, and she'll be in next week. Yeah, I wasn't here last week. Lerone, I know you talked a little bit about guns last week.
A lot about.
Okay, so
how can we not?
Well, but I had to get my 5 cents in, and
sure,
inflation.
Sure, I mean we should never stop talking about it. Actually,
well, you know, the part that really got to me was the part about teachers should carry guns. So I started thinking about who do I know who is a teacher, and without having to look very far, our board operator, Josh, rifle-toting Josh over here, he's a teacher, and you know Josh, he's been our board operator for a few years now. Wouldn't you feel safe with him carrying a gun?
Oh, wow.
Okay, and the other one is Rabbi Frank Machine Gun Joseph, who does the Jewish Music Hour just before us. So I asked Frank if he would stick by for a few minutes and talk to us a little bit about the ridiculous idea of him carrying a gun in a classroom. What do you teach?
I work with special ed students, the students that are 16 to 21 years old, that have severe disabilities. So these are this is the student population that I work with.
Okay, so if you had a gun in a class, what came to my mind, knowing that you teach special ed, is could a kid just grab a gun from you?
That would be very possible for a student to grab a gun from us, from anyone in the classroom. It would be very possible. Not that they necessarily know what to do with it, but it would be very possible to have that opportunity to pick up a gun. And unfortunately, not knowing what to do with the gun could be disastrous.
Mm-hmm. Just thinking the same thing. Yeah.
That would be disastrous.
Yeah, and especially in the case of your students, it's not that they would purposely take it to do anything malicious or evil, or
could just be out of curiosity. But if one doesn't know what they're doing with firearms, and one's not an expert in firearms, and one doesn't have training in firearms, just holding one can be disastrous, because you never know what's going to happen with that firearm, how they're going to go off. Accidents happen, but it would only be a recipe for disaster for everyone.
Right. Josh, you with a gun, I mean, ridiculous idea, yes?
Right. It would be ridiculous no matter where I was.
I mean, the thing is, teachers have gone to school to study, to go to school to teach, not because they don't want to go to school to fire off rounds. Mm-hmm. That's not their goal.
Okay, so what they're suggesting is that somebody who's trained, who knows what they're doing, maybe who had military experience, would be a teacher that had a gun. During the day, while you're teaching, aren't you too wrapped up in your teaching to even think about where the gun is? Is it locked up safely?
Right. One's is not thinking about where the gun is, what is the condition of the gun during the day when one is teaching, because one has to focus on their students, but especially in a special ed context, one has to focus on their students, because these are students that might have a seizure any moment. These are students that could have any type of health problems any given moment. So the total focus has to be on those students 100% of the time, or the students can possibly be hurt, injured, or health problems that are really quite problematic.
Do you have they're calling them in Florida resource officer, and here in Dallas, in DISD, they're just called DISD police officers. Do you have any kind of security officer in your school?
We do. We have security officers on campus. We have two police officers that are carrying firearms on campus, and then maybe 4 or 5 other officers that are hired by the district that aren't part of the official police department, but they're part of the district police department
For the district security.
for security.
That surprised me that there are that many.
You know, this whole idea of teachers carrying firearms while they're teaching is all of it stems from the NRA's message, which they reiterated this past week when they finally responded to the latest shooting, that the only way to get rid of the bad guy with a gun is to have a good guy with a gun. And I know, to me, that just sounds like you want to go back to the Wild Wild West where everybody had to shoot out. You know, every instance when President Reagan got shot, he was surrounded with people with guns. So, I mean...
How about the shooting at Fort Hood?
Exactly. And thank you.
I mean, don't soldiers have guns?
They do.
Don't they know how to use them?
Yeah.
But they want Josh to carry a gun.
They want Josh to carry a gun. So I don't know.
Maybe it's just poetry.
Maybe that's it. I just can't wrap my brain around this idea. Okay, we need more guns to shoot the other people with guns. It's like, really, that's not going to solve it.
Now, your school, though, sounds like it's better protected than the schools in Broward County are in Florida, because you're saying there are 2 officers, 4 or 5 security officers, so they're stationed around the campus. And I don't know how big that school is.
I would say 2,000 students.
Is your school?
Roughly 2,000 students.
And I don't know how big the one in Parkland, Florida is.
But roughly 2,000 students. But
and the school in Parkland had an armed guard also.
But I'm saying that was one armed guard as opposed to up to 5 or 6 people possibly. Now the one armed guard, he did not run in. I understand that.
No, we only have 2 officers that have guns
armed.
These are part of the police department. Then we have 4 or 5 other security officers that are working security, but they don't have guns. They do work security though, and they're there for any situation that may come up in a support. We have 2 with
mostly what types of situations do come up in school though that they actually are trained for, because we're not putting officers around schools expecting that, okay, once a day there's going to be this armed shooting, so okay, we'll get this one, we'll get that armed person. But they're there doing things every day.
Yes, the police officers are trained in case, to the best of their ability, in case, unfortunately, if a shooting would occur. The other security, the campus security officers, are basically there mainly if students start fights in this kind of scenario, or if some kind of disaster comes to the school and you need, that could be a natural disaster.
It could be a fire, it could be
right.
gas leak, it could be
things of this nature, and you need to orderly get students out.
An accident right outside the school. And
these kind of situations, but primarily on the campus for fights that might occur,
right.
Primarily.
Right. And as much as they're blaming this security officer, I know he was armed, but the security officer in Parkland, I'm wondering how much his job was expected to be. I'm going to go in there, probably get killed, or really taking care of fights, taking care of other things like that.
My guess is that it was more trained in case a fight occurs or in case there's some disaster, not probably thinking, and especially probably thinking there that any shooting is going to occur, and certainly not of the tragic nature of this shooting. Although if one student is lost, that's a tragedy.
Absolutely.
Sure.
I just wonder, the solution to me sounds simple, and it is just to not get the guns in the school for any shooters who want to come in and do harm. I wonder, how did this student even get into the school? I haven't heard of that yet.
You know, schools in Texas mostly, or in Dallas, have magnetic detectors that you walk through. Does your school have that?
Ours do not.
Because yours is more suburban.
It's more suburban.
Yeah.
It does not have.
Parkland is a
magnetic
suburb of Boca
detectors.
Raton. Boca Raton's not exactly a city. Boca Raton, I always call it Plano with palm trees. And this is a suburb of that. So I'm sure they didn't have that kind of security going in and out of the school. It was a very, very suburban school, not just, Irving suburb of Dallas. It would be like it was a suburb of Irving. Much smaller school system, but you don't have that kind of security going into your school at all. The Dallas high schools do have that kind of security, although I've gotten into schools without, because I've gone in as a guest of a teacher, so we don't have to go through that kind of security, I guess. But everybody is not, even in Dallas, which has pretty tight security, not everybody goes through it. Now, here's my reason that I think the NRA is pushing teachers with guns. Follow the money. You know what it would cost to arm teachers in every school across the country? Not every teacher, but a teacher in every school across the country. About $250 million.
Wow.
In gun sales, because the NRA is not offering to kick in the money.
Of course not.
For these guns that everybody's going to have. They would be gun sales that would be funded by the state or the school system or the city or whoever pays for it in that particular locality. $250 million going right to arms manufacturers. And that's where that money is coming from. That's why they're doing this. Josh, do you know of anybody in your school that is armed, or is that even allowed in your school?
No teachers.
No teachers. Okay, and do you know?
None at our school. Our school is a gun-free zone. I mean, no one is allowed to have, unless you're the two police officers that work for the school, that. No one is allowed to have a gun on campus. No one is allowed to have a gun near the campus. It's a gun-free zone.
Okay, so in your school system, Lerone, because you have a daughter in Garland, right? Schools. Okay.
Well,
so
yes.
The day after this happened last week, 5 kids were arrested in the Dallas area. Yep. 5 in the Dallas area, not just 5 across the country. 1 in Flower Mound, 1 at Plano West, 1 in South Garland High School. And then 2, 1 in Arlington, 1 in Weatherford for making threats. But the 3 in Flower Mound, Plano West, and South Garland, they caught with guns.
Actual guns. Yep.
Okay, so the one in South Garland, you said, Frank, that your school is a drug-free zone.
It's right. It's a gun-free zone.
Okay, so South Garland High School, they found on this kid a stolen phone, an unloaded gun. It was not a loaded gun that he had, but he did have a gun, and marijuana. Now, here's what I didn't understand here. He's being charged with carrying marijuana in a drug-free zone. What are the zones in Texas where you're allowed to carry marijuana? I'm just asking for a friend.
Wait, are they not charging him with illegal carrying of a gun?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But there are 3 charges. One that he stole a gun, or a phone. One that he had this unload. But carrying marijuana specifically, it's illegal in a drug-free zone.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I'm just asking. I was wondering if your school or Josh's your school, are people allowed to carry drugs?
No,
okay.
Not at all. Not at all.
I thought maybe in some schools.
Not at all.
This is a marijuana school. Now, I understand in Colorado they have or marijuana-free zones because it's legal to purchase, but I didn't know that in Texas we had. Okay, I just thought I'd clear that one up because I read the story. I was in New York at the time, and I did read that story, and I was just curious, didn't have anybody to ask on that. Do you have any solutions, before we let you go, because Rabbi's only staying through the end of this segment, on some things that could be done on the school level? And I'm not talking about regulating guns and arming teachers from a federal mandate level. Are there things that you can think of that schools can do?
Well, I think that. Well, I think on the subject itself, one thing that schools could do is make counseling available immediately, and I'm saying that beyond the school system. I think just in general, being able to provide health care for people, and especially mental health care immediately, because when somebody has a mental issue, you can't say, well, I will see you in 3 weeks, I'll see you in 2 weeks, I'll see you in a month. When a person has a mental issue and they know it, they need to have help immediately. It's I don't believe it's any different than a person who's having a heart attack necessarily. They need to go to the hospital immediately. If a person has other health issues, their appendix is about to burst you need to go to the hospital immediately. If a person has mental issues or a history of that, or even thinks that they do, and they need to see a counselor immediately. So I think one thing that we can do is make sure that anybody who needs medical help, and especially mental health, that is available immediately. And also, I believe that we can have different conversations with people about guns, because I think the subject needs to be addressed, especially anybody in education. But there are people that have a much different viewpoint and have a much different conversation than what the NRA wants to bring up. And I think we need to push that conversation and make that conversation available.
Yeah. People are arguing also that, well, it's not just a mental health issue, because people in other countries have mental health issues and then don't take guns to school and shoot schools and shoot concerts. And but they're saying, no, you're proposing gun control, and our side is proposing more mental health, and you're blocking that. Nobody from our side, and I'm calling this sides by now, and it is sides, nobody from our side, even ones who are saying, I don't really think that will help entirely, it's more than just a mental health issue. You want to provide more funds for mental health issues, that's a good thing. It will help a number of people. Whether or not it keeps down school shootings, I don't know. But we need more money for mental health, so why is, in the most recent budget, if that's what you think we need to do is increase funding for mental health issues, why was there a huge cut in mental health budgeting and funding? So great suggestion, and something that would help beyond just this issue. But the money's not there. So thank you for staying.
Oh,
thank you very much, Rabbi.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all you do. Lerone and Josh and David Taffet are wonderful advocates on behalf of improving our community and enhancing our lives in every possible way. So we want to thank all these gentlemen for all they do.
And I'll be here for you. I'll be here next week to cover for your show.
Tink you very much.
Right. Good. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. And you're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3. I was away 1 week, and I don't know 89.3 KNON FM, and we'll be back with more right after this.
This is Rollins Gilliland, and I'm listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3, and darn glad to be doing it. Hi,
And you're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 KNON FM. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Lerone Landis, and Patti will be back with us next week. Lerone.
So, in continuing our conversation about the shooting that was 2 weeks ago now in Florida, with 17 people dead, the bright spot, if there is a bright spot in this horrific event, that is the kids, the survivors. They have stepped up to the plate more so than I think that anybody, than your average kid, you would have thought to have done so. They're out speaking. They're not shutting up.
And it's not too soon for them to talk about it.
It's not
Talking about it is helping them heal.
Exactly. And they're, in this short amount of time, they seem to be making some inroads. I don't know if you saw the exchange that in the town hall meeting with the students and Marco Rubio.
Oh, they shut him down?
Totally shut him down.
Okay, so here's my theory on it. And I have to preface this with, I'm Jewish. They got a bunch of loudmouth, organized Jewish kids this time. 5 of the kids who were killed were Jewish. Their families are not going to shut up. Their families are not going to be told it's too soon to talk. And they're not going to pray about it. They're not going to, thoughts and prayers. Thanks a lot, but, my kid's dead.
Right.
And that's the Jewish answer to that. So this time they just got the wrong kids. Even the name of the school, the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School, she was an environmental activist who saved the Everglades because Florida was encroaching on the Everglades and draining and draining and draining. And she got them to stop and damming up Lake Okeechobee and to store water for the ever-increasing population in South Florida. And so water was not flowing down through the Everglades. She got them to release water and to stop the draining and preserve it and turn the Everglades into a national park. She was an activist. They go to a school of activists. A lot of Jewish kids, when we go to camp, it's not to play football. It's to learn social justice organizing.
Right.
I guarantee you, a bunch of these kids, because they're being accused of being actors.
Yeah. I was going to get to that. Two of the main faces that have become like the voices of the school. One is a young lady, if you've seen her, with the shaved head. Love her. Her name is Emma Gonzalez. And the other guy, young man, his name is David Hogg. He has been specifically accused of being a crisis actor. I think that's disgusting.
And I think that's of course it is. Yes,
it is disgusting.
Yes.
You're talking about kids who have,
and those 2 kids are not Jewish, by the way.
They are not. They are not. But you're talking about kids who have witnessed one of the most horrific events, probably in
their friends were slaughtered
in front of them.
Yeah.
Yet, because they're speaking out, because they don't want their kids to, they don't want their friends to be killed anymore, they're being called crisis actors. Now, we can have a debate. You can disagree with the kids on about what do you think should be done about the guns, but to call them actors are basically saying you guys are frauds. You weren't there.
What these kids have had, though, is some of these kids in this school have had training in social activism and how do you respond public speaking, all these kinds of things. The NRA and its henchmen were expecting kids to once again, when they were told to shut up, and these kids aren't going to do it. I love these kids, by the way. I love these kids. And I want some of these kids. The NRA is going to be in Dallas on May 4th to 6th. I want some of these kids here demonstrating with us against the garbage that's coming out of the filthy mouths of that NRA. Not every member of the NRA. I'm talking about their board, especially their leader, that disgusting, what's his name, Wayne LaPierre.
Yes.
That's coming out of their filthy mouths about this. And what you just said about they're actors, that's filth coming out of their mouths.
I mean, I just unfathomable when I started hearing this. And it all started because there's a picture, again, the young man, his name is David Hogg, who, by the way, is a student, not only just a student activist, he's a student journalist. So he is poised and somewhat prepared, and he's doing a great job. I think he's got a long career.
You know what it is? We're so used to failing high schools.
We are.
That when we have a school where kids are smart and they've been taught and they've learned and they're using what they've learned, it's like, oh, they're actors. Oh, that can't be real.
It catches us off guard. It's like, oh, wow, you're only 17.
Didn't catch me off guard. My reaction immediately was, I love those kids.
But even if you be caught off guard, I wouldn't dare accuse them of being actors. But anyway, so what happened was, I guess David Hogg was in Los Angeles back in August of last year, and he happened to be at the beach, and there was a confrontation between a lifeguard and I guess one of the surfers, and the news crew was there. They interviewed him. Again, he is a student journalist. They interviewed him. Somebody has recognized him now, and they went and put the picture side by side and said, see, how is it that he was at two different places of tragedy? He's an actor. He's a paid crisis actor. Seriously, guys? Seriously, guys?
Because the tactic of Trump, the tactic of the far right, this is a tactic. We have to understand their tactics because we can't answer them unless we do. Their tactic was, oh, it's too soon. And everybody listened and shut up. Oh, thoughts and prayers. Oh, how nice of these people to give us their thoughts. No, we understand their tactic. And this was the school that said, I don't want your thoughts and prayers. Partially because it's a large Jewish population. Parkland, once again, is right next to Boca Raton, big Jewish area. Don't want your thoughts and prayers. In fact, saying that to me, you're offending me if you give me that response. And it's too soon. No, we have big mouths, and talking things through is how we deal with crises. So don't tell me it's too soon to talk about. So we've diffused those. So now they're doing this. It's one thing after another, after another, after another, after another, after another, after another. And we get rid of this one, well, they'll come up with the next one. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what they're going to do. Yeah. Okay, so he's an actor. No, he's a damn smart kid.
He is.
And he's going to go someplace. And one of the places I hope he goes is here in Dallas on May 4th to 6th at the NRA convention.
And hopefully we can get him on the show.
I'm working on it.
I know you're working on it. I would love to meet this young man.
I want a crowd of those kids here in this studio.
Yeah.
And that will be part of what we're doing. And I need to talk to some people. I'm just the journalist. I just report. I never, I'm not the activist anymore. So, yeah, everybody here is saying, yeah, right. But if different groups can sponsor a kid, we'll see if we can do it that way. Oprah and George Clooney just each donated $500,000 to the kids of that school so that they can make sure that they get up to Washington to tell every member of Congress what they think.
And unfortunately, there's a sad part in this story also. A lot of high schools have already been threatening that if any kid takes part in that, they're going to be punished.
And the response from the parents should be, so punish my kid. And we're not setting foot in your damn school again until you get rid of that punishment.
Yeah.
Wednesday, that school opens. I want to see how many of those kids actually are back in class, in their seats this Wednesday. I bet not a lot more than a handful of them. They're not ready to shut up and sit down, and they're getting a better education doing exactly what they're doing than they would otherwise. I'm not worried about that school. I'm just saying it's going to be interesting to see. I want to see in some other schools, I want to see the punishment that they're getting when kids are walking out of school, because it's being framed, and we can't let them frame it this way, like, oh, they're just being acted, oh, they just don't want to be in school. These kids are afraid for their lives.
Exactly. How long was, what's the school? High school, one of the other school shootings. How long was it closed down? I know Sandy Hook was closed, period.
They closed Sandy Hook. They built them a new school.
But, what's the other one? It was in Colorado.
Columbine?
Columbine. How long was Columbine closed?
I don't remember. I mean, that was 1999, so
right.
It was a while ago.
Yeah. Seems like it was, seems like I remember it. It was closed for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if they went back for the rest of that semester.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not.
I mean, because you're talking about a huge crime scene.
Mm-hmm.
You got to give the cops and investigators time to ascertain exactly what happened. And
well, apparently they've done that already at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. It's ready to reopen.
Okay.
So, the school might be ready to reopen. I don't think the kids are ready to go back to school, and I don't think they should. I think they should do exactly what they're doing, because like I said, I'm not for kids just, we're off from school.
No.
They're going to get a better education, and are getting a better education God, the kids that stood up to Marco Rubio. That's a perfect example of, yes, so he's senator, so what?
Yeah.
He serves us.
Yeah.
They got it. They understand in a way that kids from other schools didn't get it quite the same way. I want to see the kids from Columbine walking out. I want to see the kids from Italy High School, which just had a shooting a few weeks ago. Those are the kids I want to see walk out. I want to see rural, I want to see urban, I want to see suburban, I want to see kids across the country saying, we are not putting up with this anymore.
And some of these kids at the school in Parkland are 18, so they can vote now. So,
and they will.
But
they will.
But the ones who are going to turn 18 within the next year or so, don't forget. Don't forget. Don't forget and vote.
And it's interesting. The congressional districts right in that area are very, very gerrymandered. But the Republican whose district intertwines with Ted Deutsch, and I can't think of who the Republican is. And I know Ted Deutsch because he was my father's congressman. Because my father lived right in that area. Even the Republican has come around and is calling for some sort of gun control and is supporting Governor Rick Scott, who, to his credit, Republican governor who broke with the NRA and said, at least pushing the age limit to buy guns to 21.
And a ban on bump stocks and a ban on the AR-15s?
On assault weapons.
Yeah, on assault weapons.
I think he originally just did say the one, but now he's even talking about, we need to talk about assault weapons. He didn't have a final bill. When you say it's too soon to talk about it, it might be too soon for me to actually have the actual legislation to present, but it's not too soon to talk about it.
Not at all.
What do you think of the mental health idea that Rabbi Joseph had?
I don't disagree with him, but I don't know if we can. We talked about this last week. I don't know if we can jump to the conclusion that everyone who commits a mass shooting is mentally ill. Now, of course, logic will probably tell you, well, you got to be crazy to go do something like that. But there is a legal standard for insanity, and I don't think everybody meets it.
Now, some of these kids, including the two at Columbine, probably had been bullied and pushed into doing what they did. They wouldn't fit necessarily into the mental illness, although it would be a situational thing that would they have been caught,
right?
Or had they been caught ahead of time, would that have helped some? Here's an interesting statistic that I saw. Now, one of the suggestions that Trump had was that maybe we could help some if parents had access to a rating system for video games and movies. Now, of course, that's a stupid suggestion because the movie rating system came in. I remember I was 16 and snuck into a film that I shouldn't have been able to. So it was sometime in the 60s.
That predates you and me, Josh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And video games ever since Ms. Pac-Man.
Yeah, ever since at least I think the mid '80s, there's been
video
ratings
game,
on games.
But here's the statistic that's interesting: most boys play violent video games. Most boys, and when I say most, I forgot what the statistic was, but it was somewhere around 75% of boys play video games, and some of them that they play are violent.
Absolutely.
On a regular basis. Most of the shooters do not play video games.
Interesting.
Isn't that an interesting statistic? It's completely different than what I expected.
Well, that's what a lot of people want to push, that narrative, that you can attribute any type of violence, public violence acts to video games and music and movies. Well, I don't know. It sounds good, but that's not the reality of it.
You would think, logically, it desensitizes you.
Right, exactly.
It gives you better, especially the video games, gives you better aim, gives you that experience that would make you a better shooter.
But I think, I don't even play video games, so I'm not an advocate of violent video games. But I also have nephews, and they play all that stuff. But I think most we're selling our kids short, and most of them realize this is fake. This is just a game.
Well, apparently,
and
that's what the statistics show.
Exactly.
When they went through most and the backgrounds of most of the shooters, most shooters don't play video games.
Yep. That's surprised.
And that surprised me.
Yeah.
Which I think, though, is important to note, just because, to go back to the mental health issue, is that, if you're expressing your anger, whether it's through a game or something, then that is, I guess, productive or whatever. Whereas if you are, like these kids seemingly not getting the help they need, not able to express, didn't his mother just die? Or, there had to be grief, there had to be emotions, and for no one to have said, let's go to therapy, let's go to...
True, but there were so many other warnings. I particularly I get a little upset when I hear that being put out there as an excuse for him doing this shooter doing what he did because he lost his mother to the flu. I'm not saying it wasn't harsh and just that's awful. I'm not saying that, but there were other warnings he had been doing for a while. Oh, yeah. A lot of warnings.
Well, apparently he had put a gun to her head at some point.
Exactly. So. And the cops, within a 6-period time, the cops have been called to his house 39 times.
Here's an interesting fact about the law that the Orlando police chief, who had to deal with the Pulse nightclub shooting, put out there. He said, if we could just pull anybody and everybody out for a mental health evaluation, that would be 3 days. He is then released. And during that time, I can't prevent him from buying a gun. So he said, something in addition needs to be done. He said there's nothing wrong with more mental health evaluations, but something has to be done with the ability for somebody like that to get a gun. We need to take a break. You're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 Knon FM. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Lerone Landis. We'll be back with more Lambda Weekly right after this.
Hi, this is Valletta Lil, and I listen to Lambda Weekly. I hope that you will too.
And you are listening to Lambda Weekly. We were talking about the shootings, but why don't we go on to a couple of other things that have been going on?
There's some other things going on. There is a lesbian couple who has... I don't think my mic is on. There we go. Thank you. Thanks, Josh.
Josh just didn't want you on the air.
Okay, there's a lesbian couple right here in Texas who have filed a lawsuit against the federal government because they were turned away to be foster parents for some refugee children. And both of them are professors at Texas A&M. I guess they have been working with Catholic, and the organization that turned them away is the Catholic Charities of Fort Worth. They have been working with them, done all the work to become an actual certified foster parents. They knew that there were two women, knew that they were married, but when it came time to actually get a kid, they said no. And the reason why is because they told them that they were not, what's the quote? They were not, their relationship didn't mirror the Holy Family.
And that's legal now.
I don't know. Is it in Texas?
Yeah, federally, because of rule changes that Trump made.
Gotcha.
I don't know whether it'll stand up in court or what. It's interesting. These are refugee kids.
Refugee kids. Uh-huh.
It's not like everybody is jumping in and offering their homes to all these kids that need homes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know.
What are they thinking?
I know.
Now,
what are you thinking?
I understand if we have, thank you, but we have so many families who are offering to open their homes to these kids and have gone through foster care training. Foster care training is pretty extensive.
Is it? It is extensive.
Even though you're a parent.
And very invasive.
You've been raising a kid. Some of the things that you do with your kid wouldn't be allowed.
I don't know, but I get your point. No, seriously.
Seriously, certain things like you have to be very careful with things like timeouts and all kinds of things like that, because what it means to you and what it means to your kid are a whole lot different than what might have happened in foster kids' abusive home or
disciplinary stuff was what you're getting at. You're absolutely right.
You can't say to a foster kid who's acting up at the table, go to your room.
Right.
Because what you're doing then is denying them food. And why is this kid a refugee? It could be from a place where there was starvation or whatever, and so you're taking the food away from the child. It is doing something different psychologically to them than when you tell Gabrielle, go to your room, you're not having any more dinner.
Right.
And she, will then walk downstairs and snack all she wants a little bit later. That's not what a foster child's going to do. And I'm not accusing Gabrielle of being a disobedient kid. She's a great kid. But lots of things. So, even though you're a parent, you know how to take care of a kid, whereas Josh and I, not so much. And I'd be fearful for the safety of the kid from our houses. You know how to be a parent. You have to go through this.
I also have to go through this.
Like 40 hours of training in order to host the kid. So Catholic Charities is not out there saying, thank you very much. We'll keep your application because we have so many parents volunteering here. That ain't the case.
No. There was a story last week of a lesbian, or not a couple, but a lesbian woman teacher in Florida who got fired. She was teaching at a Catholic school when she announced that she just got married to her female partner. And, my response was, of course it's awful, but I don't understand why she was working at a school like that in the first place. And, I'm really big on doing your homework. Well, these ladies in this situation did their homework. They were very upfront about, look, here we are, we're married, yada, yada, and they were okay with it up until the point where it came time to actually let them have a kid. So
let them go through the whole training.
They let them go through the whole training and everything. Did they pay? It doesn't say.
Doesn't say whether they paid.
It does not. It does not. But they're being represented by Lambda Legal, and so maybe we should get Ken on, and maybe he can tell us a little more detail about it.
Yeah. It's one of those cases where I'm all for private and religious institutions to have the ability to do some of the adoption services and other things like that, and other family services. I'm not. Well, I'm not in favor of them being able to discriminate. It bothers me less when you're in a place where, okay, this is the religious one, this is the non-religious one, but if there isn't a non-religious one for you to go to and there is no option, I'm not in favor of them being able to in any way discriminate that way.
Right.
I know personally I wouldn't go to an organization like that knowing what their policies are.
Right.
I did a story a number of years ago on 2 Iraqi refugees who were here, and one of the things that Catholic Charities was contracted to do was a refugee is entitled to certain minimal pieces of furniture and a couple of other things and an apartment, and there are a number of things that they get when they're here on refugee status. And Catholic Charities wouldn't give them a bed. They were sleeping on the floor. They're entitled to a bed. They wouldn't give them several other things, so they had basically an empty apartment. I think they had 1 chair, something like that. But they were sleeping on the floor and just didn't know how to get what they needed. Only one of them actually even spoke enough English that he could explain to me what it was that he needed and wasn't getting, and what their living conditions were. That story, somebody from a Unitarian organization with the United Nations saw the story, contacted me, and we got them in touch with each other. And so a Unitarian organization was able to actually get them the services and the and the actual things that they were entitled to, it shouldn't come to that.
It should not.
And it was obvious that some of the things they weren't getting were because they were just in an age group that they slipped through the cracks. Part of what a refugee can get is some training, so that if you left your country and you were a doctor, well, here they'll train you for some medical related, even if not to be a doctor, but some medical related job that you can then go and get a job. These kids were like 18 and 20 and had been, they'd been tortured and everything else. They had basically not finished high school. Gotcha. So they didn't have a trade. So that was not Catholic Charity's fault that they weren't arranging that, but the furniture was. Mm-hmm. So they got them what they could, and we helped them get a job, and they ended up getting jobs, something that they could do and support themselves. And this was a gay couple, and that was part of why they were being, Josh was just asking, were they gay? That was part of why they couldn't get what they wanted through Catholic Charities this way.
I think that's something about the refugees, though, that, whenever we hear about the refugee story, we're talking about Iraq, we're talking about Syria, we're talking about, South America, wherever the refugee is coming from. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that the social groups that these refugees represent wouldn't be accepted here in the States even if they were born here. And so whenever you discuss refugees, and there's a whole list of literature on this, one of the things you have to discuss is that the cultural bias of the country in which they are moving, because if we have biases against, the homosexual community or other groups, then, the fact that they are refugees isn't going to gain sympathy.
One of my cousins, Suzanne, who was on the show, one of her daughters works for Homeland Security. And what her job is to distinguish between people who deserve refugee status and those who might be here for other reasons. Mm-hmm. And she said one of the reasons that they will give refugee status has to do with a person coming from a country where their lives would be in danger for them being gay or lesbian. She said that's probably one of the easiest cases to make right now. When she's trying to distinguish and go through what their history is. So here, actually, it doesn't work against you for getting refugee status. It doesn't necessarily help you along the way.
The other social groups.
Right.
There's a little tidbit of this story. One of the partners in this situation who was turned away from getting access to one of these refugee children, she said that she was shocked when what she heard. She asked about the LGBT children who Catholic Charities is responsible for finding homes for. She said that she was told that none of the 700 kids that they're in charge of are LGBT.
And you know something? Of
Seriously?
course that's wrong. But because of their blindness, at least they're not going to discriminate against the kids. And as ridiculous and backwards as that sounds,
I get what you're saying.
Because where I worry about it is, I'm not as worried about the parents who can't adopt through this agency. My real answer to that in most cases is, then find a different agency. There are so many kids out there that need homes. Go through CPS. CPS not only doesn't discriminate, but recruits good gay and lesbian homes for kids because they know we make good parents. Not everybody, not Josh. but we make good parents, and there's no reason to discriminate. But I worry much more about the kids who are gay and lesbian. Well, if they're saying none of these kids are gay and lesbian, let them live in their delusional world as long as they're not discriminating against these kids.
Right.
Now, where it's going to hurt is when they put a kid who is gay or lesbian or transgender into a very fundamentalist home, and they're going to do harm to that kid. Mm-hmm. So there is that danger. at least they're not going to discriminate in placing kids. And the problem with a group that will discriminate in placing kids is that kid is probably not going to find a home and then is going to be, in the foster system until they're 18 and then out on the street.
Right.
So, you had a story about Bermuda, and I think we've talked a little bit about this, but
this story
just bears repeating.
is a couple of weeks old, but still very much important because it proves what we've been saying, and that it can happen. What I'm talking about is the repeal of marriage equality. Don't think that because we have it, now we've had it legally nationwide 3 years.
3 years.
3 years
2015.
now. That it can't be rolled back. So Bermuda had same-sex marriage just a year ago, and now their Minister of Home Affairs has signed legislation that basically has replaced marriage equality with domestic partnership. And his quote is, the act is intended to strike a fair balance between two currently irreconcilable groups in Bermuda. Basically, I guess a lot of people are still upset about it. According to the poll, most of the people there are still against it. So they repealed it. First country in the world to do this.
To repeal marriage equality, but it can't happen.
Right. But it can happen.
I'm not sure what the difference is between it legally between the two, because that can vary by state, or not by state, by country.
Yes.
Because it is whatever it is.
Right.
But I'll tell you what, being married meant something. Oh, you're in a domestic partnership meant nothing.
No, absolutely right.
And every time I bring up Brian and Brian's death, which is coming up in 2 weeks, it's the 1 year anniversary. But the night we went to Parkland Hospital, my being his husband was the difference between my being his next of kin and not. Between having to call his mother at midnight,
right,
and my being able to make the decision,
right,
standing there, you've done everything you can.
Had you said, I'm his domestic partner, the whole experience would have taken on a different life,
right,
and not a good one,
right.
It would have, it wasn't good to begin with,
right.
It would have been worse, absolutely.
And the way I was treated by everybody from the hospital chaplain, who we were of different faiths. He knew that it was a same-sex partner. I was treated with absolute respect and care and love and everything else that you would expect from a chaplain. All he wanted to know was that I was going to be okay, that I had a support system, that everything that a chaplain should do for somebody. The hospital staff made sure that I had a way to get home, and when I didn't, because I live right across the street from Parkland, I was going to walk. They absolutely wouldn't let me walk. They had a security police officer driving me home. Absolutely when I said, what about the bill? They said, we have your address, we'll send anything to you. Absolute respect. Right. Now, a week later, when I was in Baylor, not so much.
Not so much.
Not so much with the same kind of respect. At the religious institution.
Of course. But Bermuda is a territory of Great Britain.
Yes.
And do they still hold any actual legal power over them?
Some.
Because I wonder.
This isn't one of the things, obviously.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, are they
a number of the Caribbean islands, like Curacao, which is a part of the Netherlands, they have separate laws for marriage equality. When the Netherlands had marriage equality, they didn't, which was stupid on their part, because had Curacao started marriage equality as being part of the Netherlands back in the early 2000s, can you imagine what a tourist destination it would have become?
Oh, big time.
They didn't want it.
Yeah.
It was, and if you don't believe in something, and rather than go for just big money, I guess good for them for not taking my money cynically.
Yeah.
But
Well, for those of you who were, I hope it's a were planning to vacation in Bermuda this summer, think again.
Yeah. There's a couple who's moved here specifically because of that. They lived in Bermuda, and I'm going to try to get in touch with them about coming on.
Okay.
So, for all of us here at Lambda Weekly, have a good week. We'll see you next week.
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like, follow, or subscribe to us and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call.